Ava Reed tugged nervously at the hem of her worn thrift store dress as she stepped out of the cab. The crisp evening air carried a faint breeze from the river nearby, mingling with the subtle scent of polished wood and fresh linen that enveloped the grand entrance of La Belle Rive. It was a far cry from the modest diner kitchen where she spent long hours pouring coffee and wiping tables. Tonight was different. Tonight, she had saved every penny from months of double shifts just to book a table at the city's most exclusive restaurant. She clutched a simple cotton tote bag, a stark contrast to the elegant leather purses carried by the women around her. Ava smoothed back her tangled hair and tried to steady her breath as the maitre d' smiled politely, his crisp uniform sparkling under the soft chandelier lights. "Good evening. I have a reservation under Reed," she said, her voice a little too loud against the quiet murmur of well-dressed patrons. He glanced down at the list, brows knitting. "Miss Reed, I see your booking. Right this way." The path led her past polished oak paneling and gleaming silver, her heart pounding with excitement and a touch of disbelief. Seated at her table, Ava scanned the elegant menus with wide eyes. When a sommelier appeared at her side, she managed a shy smile. "Excuse me, may I see the wine list?" The list of juices, please." Her cheeks flushed as she mispronounced sommelier and stumbled over her words. The sommelier's face tightened into a smirk. "The wine list, madam," he corrected sharply, voice low but sharp enough for nearby diners to overhear. He leaned closer to a passing waiter and muttered, "Looks like someone's out of her depth." A few muffled chuckles rippled around the room. Ava's hands trembled as the sting of humiliation washed over her. The dream she had cherished felt suddenly unreachable and cruelly mocked. Ava stepped back from the table, her cheeks still burning from the sommelier's biting remark. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes, some curious, some amused, some plainly disdainful. A faint murmur spread through the dining room like a ripple across still water. One woman near the corner smirked into her wine glass. A man with a sharp suit whispered something to his companion, who chuckled softly. But not everyone was harsh. A few discreet glances darted away, unwilling to witness the spectacle but unsure how to intervene. Her heart hammered painfully against her ribs. She gathered her thin coat around her and murmured apologies as she made her way to the exit, head bowed to avoid more stares. The maitre d' offered no assistance, his expression unreadable. A waiter lingered briefly in awkward silence before nodding silently towards the door. Outside, the clean, cool night air hit Ava like a bomb, but the ache inside her chest remained. She found a nearby stone bench just beyond the manicured hedges. The world softened under the yellow streetlights, and for a while, the sounds of clinking glasses and low hums faded behind her. Tears welled unbidden as she sat, folding her hands in her lap, overwhelmed by a heavy tide of humiliation and sadness. But beneath the ache, a faint ember of something else, determination, maybe, glowed in the dark. Her thoughts began to drift, peeling back through the months leading to this night. She recalled the countless early mornings starting in the diner's chilly kitchen. Hands raw from scrubbing counters. The lingering smell of burnt toast mixed with strong coffee that clung to her clothes. How many times had she skipped lunch, pushing aside hunger to send a small sum to her aging mother or stash a few dollars in a battered tin can at home? She remembered the phone call that crushed her spirit the year before, the quiet voice of the nurse telling her that her father's cancer had worsened, and the prognosis was grim. The string of hospital visits, the long drives back home spent staring at the gray horizon. How she had barely allowed herself to mourn, instead working longer hours to cover the bills and keep the household afloat. And yet through it all, there had been moments of light. Her mother telling her firmly, "You deserve to dream. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The worn notebook where Ava jotted down her wish list places, a garden she longed to visit, a book she yearned to finish, and, always, La Belle Rive. That restaurant had stood almost like a distant star on her mental map, a symbol of everything she hoped for but couldn't touch. The gleam of crystal stemware, the gentle clink of fine cutlery, the shimmer of candlelight. She had imagined slipping past its doors, the swirl of soft fabrics and polite voices enveloping her. And now, that dream lay shattered on the floor alongside the smirks and whispered jabs. A quiet bitterness settled over her, but it was mingled with an acute awareness. This was more than just a bad night. It was a lesson in the sharp edge of exclusion, in how kindness and dignity often felt reserved for those born into different worlds. She swallowed hard, hate and sorrow slicing through her, yet refusing to dominate. The cool night air began to revive her senses. She noticed the faint scent of jasmine from a nearby bush, the gentle rustle of leaves in a soft breeze, and the subtle hum of the city that never truly slept. She pulled her coat tighter, and with a deep breath, stood slowly. The aching in her chest didn't vanish, but neither did the spark to keep going. Before leaving the quiet bench, Ava let her mind wander again, recalling the hope that had carried her this far. How she had chosen La Belle Rive not just for the oysters or the famed desserts, but because her doctor had once recommended a moment of joy to help ease her lingering pain after the ordeal with her father. That night out was meant to be more than just a meal, it was a reckoning with survival, a small victory carved from hardship. She thought too of the little sacrifices, the evenings spent counting change rather than joining friends at a bar, the months of skipping new shoes to keep saving, the quiet comfort of imagining that she could belong somewhere beyond the diner counter. Even after tonight's collapse, those hopes were still there, fragile but alive. They were a part of her, not something any sommelier's sneer could erase. Ava's breath steadied as she began to walk away, the weight of humiliation a raw wound but not a tomb. Each step echoed with the memory of how far she had come, the strength she had quietly gathered with every hard day and lonely night. She was more than the plastic bag she carried or the mispronounced words she'd stumbled over. Somewhere beneath the surface was a resilience that no luxury restaurant could buy or destroy. The distant city lights blurred as tears streaked her cheeks once more, but this time there was no shame in them, only the release of a hurt that spoke of battles fought in silence. As she turned her back on La Belle Rive for the last time that evening, Ava promised herself something quietly fierce. She would not let this moment define her. The road ahead was uncertain and surely tough, but tonight was only one page of her story, not the whole chapter. She would rise again and, somehow, find a way to hold on to her dreams, no matter how far away they seemed. Ava's steps echoed softly against the cobblestone as she made her way away from the front entrance of La Belle Rive, her coat drawn tight against the lingering night chill. The sting of humiliation still coursed through her veins, but she had made a quiet promise to herself. The night was far from over. Not yet. As she passed the sleek black facade of the restaurant's side entrance, which was tucked behind a neatly trimmed hedge, something caught her eye. A fire exit door stood slightly ajar, its metal latch hanging loosely instead of firmly latched. Concern flickered in her chest. For a moment, she hesitated. That small detail was out of place in a place so carefully curated and controlled. Curiosity edged her forward. Approaching the door, she peered inside. The kitchen staff had gone on break, leaving the corridor empty and quietly humming with the low buzz of refrigeration units. A faded sign on the wall declared, "Emergency exit, keep clear," but rust had claimed most of the paint, giving the message a forgotten feel. As she studied the door, she noticed a rusted padlock dangling uselessly from a hook on the wall nearby. It was clear that the fire exit was supposed to be secured, yet here it was left ajar and unmonitored, a clear safety hazard. Her pulse quickened. In a place of such prestige, how could something so fundamental be neglected? Suddenly, a faint conversation drifted from a nearby service alley. She moved quietly to listen and heard two men's voices, one a young kitchen porter, the other a grizzled line cook. "You hear about the wine cellar stuff," the porter whispered, twitching his gaze nervously. "Course I do," the gruff cook replied. "The boss wants us to keep quiet, but all those fancy bottles? They're fakes. Cheap house red bottled in those expensive labels they got shipped in from a warehouse downstate. No real sommelier would touch this place." A flicker of disbelief crossed Ava. Could the heart of the restaurant's much vaunted elegance be a lie wrapped in shining glass? The porter chuckled darkly. "Yeah, and don't get me started on the organic bins. The stuff in there smells like chemicals, not compost. If the health inspector ever came around, we'd all be out of a job." Ava's eyes drifted toward a large metal bin near the alley, marked "Organic Waste," overflowing with various containers and plastic bags leaking mysterious greenish liquid. The stench was faint but unmistakably unnatural. Her stomach clenched. This was no small oversight, that was a serious violation, potentially dangerous. She felt a surge of responsibility swell within her, mingling uneasily with the bruised feelings from earlier. Taking a cautious step back, Ava reached into her tote and pulled out her phone. With trembling fingers, she snapped photos of the ajar fire exit, the rusty lock on the hook, and the overflowing organic bin with visible leaks. The dim light caught reflections off the stained bags, capturing evidence that no one should overlook. Her hand steadied as she typed a brief message: "Concerns about safety violations at La Belle Rive. Fire exit unsecured. Possible counterfeit wines, potential biohazard in waste bins. Please investigate." She hesitated, then hit send to the local health department's email, tacking on the photos as proof. She also composed a succinct email to a popular local food blogger, one known for investigating restaurants and exposing dangerous or fraudulent establishments. She included a short account of her humiliating experience with the sommelier, hoping to add some perspective about the restaurant's arrogant attitude toward outsiders. Her breath caught, then slowed. What she was doing felt both daunting and necessary. The gusts of shame from earlier began to transform into a quiet flame of resolve. This wasn't just about her anymore, this was about honesty and safety. Before she turned to leave, she glanced back at the glowing windows of La Belle Rive. Inside, gleaming plates and sparkling glassware lent an illusion of perfection, but beneath the surface, cracks were widening. Ava's own experience had been a small window into something much bigger. With the night pressing on, Ava pulled on her coat and walked away with purpose, every step lighter than before. The air was still cool, the city's nighttime hum softly wrapping around her like a shawl. Somewhere beyond her sight, life continued as usual. Glasses clinked, laughter floated out onto sidewalks, and servers moved elegantly between tables. But Ava's quiet action rippled beyond those walls. The next day would bring change, and she was part of that first gentle push. And for now, that was enough. The morning light spilled over the city, shining pale gold through the curtains of Ava's small apartment. She sat at the kitchen table, sipping a modest cup of tea, when her phone buzzed insistently. Tentatively, she unlocked it, and an array of notifications flooded her screen: messages, comments, and shares linked to an article that had gone viral overnight. The piece was posted on the popular local food blogger's website, headlined "The Truth Behind La Belle Rive, A Whisper Beneath Luxury," and detailed everything Ava had relayed: the counterfeit wines, the unsealed fire exit, the unsanitary waste disposal. It included her description of the sommelier's public humiliation and her cautious but determined efforts to bring the truth to light. Comments poured in rapidly. Some expressed shock, readers shocked that such a prestigious establishment could harbor such serious lapses. Others shared similar experiences. "I went there once," one wrote, "and felt completely out of place, like I wasn't welcome." Another said, "Thank you, Ava. It takes courage to stand up to places that treat people like this. Ava's inbox filled with words of encouragement, from strangers, friends, and even a few coworkers. But as the public outcry grew, so too did the pressure on La Belle Rive. By midday, the restaurant's management released a carefully worded statement. They denied allegations of counterfeit wines and safety violations, insisting their commitment to quality remains unwavering. However, they acknowledged the sommelier's unprofessional behavior toward a customer and announced he had been suspended pending review. Ava read these lines with a calm that surprised even herself. The sommelier's suspension was the first sign that her courage had unsettled the veneer of perfection the restaurant projected. Later that afternoon, the city's health department confirmed that inspectors were planning an unannounced visit to La Belle Rive. News outlets picked up the story, and the social media storm reached a fever pitch. Hashtags like #RespectForAll, #TruthAtLaBelleRive trended locally, as more customers voiced support and concern. When inspectors arrived at the restaurant that afternoon, they found multiple violations. The fire exit, indeed, was not properly secured as required by law. The organic waste bins contained chemical containers improperly disposed of, posing a contamination risk. Documentation revealed that the sommelier lacked the professional certifications listed on the staff roster. And the famed wine cellar? Samples taken confirmed the wines were misrepresented, some even found to be low-quality supermarket bottles relabeled with expensive branding. The investigation's findings made headlines, prompting regulatory fines and a temporary suspension of select licenses. The restaurant's prestigious multi-star rating was immediately pulled pending remediation. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The once arrogant sommelier was nowhere to be seen. His suspension had severed his hold on the establishment's inner circle. Managers scrambled to contact public relations firms. Servers whispered anxiously among themselves. Meanwhile, Ava's life quietly transformed in unexpected ways. Messages of support filled her phone. Friends who once considered her quiet and unremarkable now saw her as a symbol of integrity and resilience. Some days, neighbors stopped her on the street to offer thanks or share their own stories of being dismissed or judged. Others reached out online, eager to hear how she stood strong amid such opposition. A local workers' rights group invited Ava to speak about her experience, emphasizing dignity and respect in the workplace and public spaces. Though hesitant at first, Ava agreed, finding the courage to use her voice beyond her small world. Stories like hers began to weave into a larger conversation bubbling in the community. Other, everyday, customers stepped forward, revealing examples of subtle shaming, exclusion, or neglect they endured when entering certain places. Ava's experience became a catalyst, not a grand revolution, but a persistent call for empathy and fairness. The shadow cast by the scandal lingered over La Belle Rive in the weeks that followed. Renovations were announced. The management promised new policies focused on transparency, training, and safety. The glowing facade that once welcomed only the elite began to crack, exposing vulnerabilities wrapped in polished veneers. For Ava, the consequences of her actions were profound. Though she had sought only to reclaim a moment of joy, she had ignited a change no one anticipated. The humiliation she suffered no longer defined her. Instead, it fueled a quiet strength that inspired a community to rethink how respect and kindness should never be reserved for a select few. And in that, Ava found something deeper, a validation of her worth, a reclaiming of dignity not through wealth or status, but through courage. Weeks had passed since Ava's story had sent shockwaves through the city's refined circles. The hum of La Belle Rive's scandal had softened into a distant murmur, replaced by rumors of change and new management. But for Ava, life had slipped back into its familiar rhythm: the early mornings at the diner, the clatter of plates, the warm aroma of brewing coffee. Yet something within her had shifted, a quiet resolve now rooted deep beneath her simple exterior. She stood behind the counter that morning, wearing her usual thrifted dress that hugged her frame just so and the ever-present worn sneakers on her feet. The faded cotton of her work apron smelled faintly of day-old bread and coffee grounds. Customers came and went, each greeted with her steady smile and sincere warmth. Yet, now, the way Ava held herself was subtly different, an unspoken confidence that lit her eyes and straightened her back. A message notification chimed softly from the corner of the room. She wiped her hands on her apron and glanced down at her phone resting against a stack of order slips. The subject line read, "Ava Reed, thank you for your courage." It was from the city's public health department. Opening the email, Ava's lips curved into a gentle smile. The letter expressed heartfelt gratitude for her alertness and bravery in reporting safety concerns at La Belle Rive. It acknowledged how her prompt action had not only protected public health but also inspired broader conversations about fairness and dignity in public spaces. The letter invited her to a community gathering centered on voices of everyday courage and hope. A flutter of nervous excitement warmed Ava's chest. She hadn't expected recognition beyond the supportive messages from friends and neighbors. This was something else. A subtle acknowledgement from an institution that usually kept its distance from stories of personal struggle. She tucked the phone away, feeling an unfamiliar but welcome glow of validation. Later that week, Ava was invited to speak at a small community center filled with local residents, activists, and social advocates. She stood in front of a modest crowd, her voice steady but humble. She spoke not about grand battles, but about small acts of dignity, about the power in speaking up when kindness and respect are denied, and the quiet courage in holding on to one's dreams despite setbacks. After the talk, a few attendees approached her with smiles and warm handshakes. A young woman thanked her for showing that ordinary people could create ripple effects of change. An older man shared his own experience of feeling invisible in elite spaces and how her story had given him hope. Back home that evening, Ava sat in her favorite chair, a cup of chamomile steaming gently on the side table. She looked through the window at the busy street below. There, amidst the flow of people and lives unfolding, she found peace. The hum of the city had taken on a new meaning, one that included her. Ava found herself passing by La Belle Rive one afternoon while running errands. The once intimidating building looked different now. A new sign hung by the entrance, under new management, committed to authenticity and inclusion. The polished windows gleamed with renewed purpose. Beneath the changes, Ava sensed a tentative hope, not just in the restaurant's promise but in the small, steady transformations possible when people stand for fairness. She paused for a moment before moving on, a subtle smile playing on her lips. The dreams she carried hadn't vanished, they had grown richer, no longer just about entering a dazzling world but about reshaping it to welcome all. Later, as she shared a quiet laugh with her coworkers during a break, sipping tea from a chipped mug, Ava felt something profound. Her life might have no grand headlines or glittering accolades, but it held something rare and unshakable. The strength to rise, to speak, and to walk tall despite the weight of judgment. Ava did not need status or wealth to claim her dignity. She had something far stronger, the courage to be herself and the quiet power to make the world a little fairer. And for her, that was more than enough.